You know what's like the craziest part to me? What I find somewhat hilarious. For the longest time, we always thought like, oh, automation is gonna come and waiters are gonna lose jobs, truck drivers are gonna lose jobs. It's funny that it's actually the creative jobs that are the ones that are being gonna get hit first.
Welcome, everybody, to another Coinage Chat, GM, or perhaps good afternoon, good night, wherever the hell you are around this beautiful earth. I'm the host of Coinage, Zach Usman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studio in New York City, and excited, honestly, quite excited, ecstatic even, to have our guest on today, the founder of Osmosis, Sunny Aggarwal, joining us here on the space. Sunny, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, this one particularly is good for me because, a lot of people in our community, of course, being a community-owned show, steered by our NFT holders. One of our NFT holders is Chad Barraford. He actually won our community vote to replace me as co-host, the founder of THORChain, built on the Cosmos SDK. He can't stop raving about what you guys are up to in the Cosmos ecosystem. Of course, you as the founder of Osmosis, one of the largest DEXs, leading DEX in the Cosmos ecosystem. A lot to dig into today, Sunny. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us. And of course, if you're listening to this, feel free to hop up, request the mic. We can get to some questions later on in the space. But Sunny, just want to start because honestly, it's not just Chad that's been talking about Cosmos being the project to watch. It's mostly everybody I've ever interviewed. And I've interviewed some people, let me just say. Of course, Coinage made our mark with the Terra exclusive, RIP Terra. That was another project built in the Cosmos SDK. So many other people talking about Cosmos. Why don't we just start for people who might not know what Cosmos is all about, why it's a project that has so many crypto OGs talking about it, and the idea, I think, that's really caught on of interoperability in the space, kind of pairing blockchains together, why it has so much attention.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of attention because it really fits uh, like a very obvious next step in the evolution of how blockchains should be built, right? So the example, the narrative I always like to analogize it to is like how you had the development of human civilizations, where in the early days you had like villages and kingdoms not very well connected with each other, but like maybe a little bit of trade going on. And what people realized that was like through mass scale economic integration is how you get you get this composability and lots of new things happen. And the way that humans did this for many millennia is these systems called empires, where you basically say like, hey, okay, we're going to put everything into one big political system, and then you have all this like nice composability and everything. People are trading across continents, like because they're all under these one empire. But you lose out a lot of benefits as well. You got to pay taxes to the capital. You got to follow this like pretty strict set of rules. You're not allowed to leave. And basically, recently in the last 100-ish years of humanity, we basically shifted away from this empire model of the world towards this more nation state based nation state, city state model of the world, where but the key is we still have this large scale economic integration without this like large scale political integration. And that was caused by a number of technologies, right? You had like obviously the internet, but you also have like institutions like the UN, World Bank, IMF, like these like systems that are coordination mechanisms for nation states. And then you also have uh, like containerization, which is like what I mean by that is if you ever go to the shipping ports in your local shipyard.
Nearest municipality. You go to, over here in New York, we got a shit ton of those ships coming in and out all the time. Yes.
Exactly. And you'll notice they all have the same exact like shipping container. And because the reason is that this is a standard that was developed in like the 1970s, but now every shipyard has the machinery to handle these specific containers. Every cargo ship in the world is built to like ship these specific containers. And what basically that shows is that through like standardization, now you can have like any port in the world ship goods to any other port in the world through these standards. So okay, so why am I saying all of this? So I like to like this is
Yeah, people are just tuning in. They're like, wait a minute, it's a shipping space with Sunny today? Yeah, they're confused. But yes, keep going.
So how this relates to blockchains is I see like the generation one of blockchains. You had your like Bitcoin, Namecoin, Saya. Like these are all application specific blockchains. Bitcoin was for payment. Saya was for storage. Namecoin was for DNS. But there was no way of these composing together, and so like they were very much like that V1 of like the kingdoms model, right?
Yeah.
To come solve this came the Ethereum empire. And basically it said, hey, okay, let's put everything into one standard system. And then we will like have all this amazing composability and it'll be like great. And it was true, right? Like you had this huge boom in innovation with the Ethereum empire, but it also came with these cons where you basically have like to pay taxes to the empire, and that comes in the form of needing to pay ETH as transaction fees, whether you're paying it for the base fees or for the data availability. You lose out on a lot of customizability when you're building on Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
Cosmos comes in and says, hey, let's build this world of nation states for blockchains where let's let every application, let's let every community have their own blockchain, but then we still build this composability where, you know, the level two composability, but with the level one sovereignty. It's like you get the best of both worlds, and so that's where you see this boom in what we call app chains, where Osmosis is an app chain. It's focused on being a DEX. THORChain is another app chain, also a DEX. You had Terra was an app chain focused on stable coins. You have app chains focused on liquid staking. You have app chains focused on being bridges. You have all these like different app chains, but
Yeah.
then using this standardized protocol called IBC, it's basically a standard way of letting any of these blockchains built using this stack to talk to each other. And so this is our equivalent of this like shipping standardization. Now you can have any blockchain that supports this standard talk to any other blockchain that also supports this standard.
Yeah, there you go. So you've landed it. That was the metaphor that everyone's like, all right, where are we going here? Boom, Sunny landed it there. Now you understand why we were talking about ships to start the space. But the reason why I think I love that so much and why I think so many people in the space have the respect for the Cosmos ecosystem is exactly that. Because, Web3 ideals are not about having walls up. I think a lot of people see the echo chambers happening within these own communities and say, that's not necessarily great either, because people over there in that community want to interact with people over here in this community, and you have that going on with Cosmos, and I think that that's kind of been intriguing to watch. And you, of course, I guess personally, have been attached to this ecosystem for quite some time, right? I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started building the space, back when you were 19? I think
Yep,
that's right.
I started working on Cosmos. Yeah, when I was 19, back in summer of 2017. It was the summer after my sophomore year of college, and I just started interning there and never never looked back. I uh,
Stuck with it the whole time through.
somehow.
But yeah, no, I mean, so when we talk about the evolution of the space too, and that's another one of the things that I was excited to get into with kind of an OG and building from the very beginning here, is how the space has evolved since the times of you building back then to where it is now. Obviously, some of the communities that were around are no more. And obviously, I think some of the enthusiasm around tokenomics have changed as well. I mean, what have you looked at as maybe the biggest changes since you entered the space to where we are here in the year of our Lord 2023, having now survived what was a very difficult 2022?
Yeah. Um, I think obviously like when I joined, I'll admit I was very Bitcoin maxi. At the time, this is like I got into the space in like 2015, 2016. And at the time, Ethereum was barely a thing. The first time I ever heard about Ethereum was like during the DAO hack, and so that
Yeah.
was it kind of put me off of it a little bit. I was like, oh, these guys are crazy talking about forking the blockchain, and what are they talking about? But I eventually came around and I was like, oh wow, okay, there is a lot of interesting stuff you can do with crypto beyond just this like payments focus that Bitcoin had. Like this like whole idea of DeFi was like got really exciting. And so yeah, that was I think that. But then I'll admit I've always had still a soft spot in my heart for Bitcoin. I like this is part of why I one of the reasons I started working on Cosmos was this vision of app chains and stuff was like an idea that originally came from the Bitcoin core devs, right? Like Blockstream was the one who wrote the white paper called sidechains and came up with this idea of like, hey, we're going to build all, their take was, hey, we don't need to make the Bitcoin blockchain like all added all these new features. We're just going to build all these new features on other blockchains, and Bitcoin is going to flow onto them. And that vision really excited me. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Keep the core as secure and simple as possible, and then let people who want to go use it do that. But then they kind of like never executed on it, right? And that's kind of where Cosmos I was excited about it. I was like, hey, okay, this is our opportunity. Part of what like I didn't get super into Ethereum early on was like I was like, this is all really cool, but like, what is this ETH shitcoin? Like, what about Bitcoin? I thought we are building the app layer for Bitcoin. Um, and so that's kind of like with Cosmos. I was like, okay, great. We're going to build the app layer for Bitcoin. And obviously it kind of like got that goal, I think, maybe got put on the back burner for a very long time,
Hmm.
because just focus on shipping so much other stuff, building the ecosystem and whatnot. And I just like in the meanwhile I saw Bitcoin development kind of stagnate a little bit, which kind of made me a little bit disheartened. I think the big one was there was this update called BIP 119 that I was really excited for back like about a
Yeah.
year and a half ago, and that kind of got rejected basically. And that was just basically going to make it a more trustless way of bridging Bitcoin onto other chains, make it
And
way.
I wonder if that came from like this concept of no, we don't want to bridge because we want everyone to stay on ours. And
Yeah,
that's very antithetical to kind of, I guess, what Cosmos is all about.
exactly. And I just do think that the Bitcoin core devs are a little bit you know way too not open to new ideas, and like all the people who are really interested in like innovating kind of eventually left Bitcoin core dev and have shifted away.
Yeah.
But ordinals, I think, really came and changed everything. So like it's actually it's an old friend of mine who was the one who built ordinals, and like it was this like, even if ordinals itself is like whatever, like it's not the game changer. What was important, what it did was it showed that, oh, Bitcoiners can get excited about stuff, and that's important, right?
And
And like,
maybe do stuff to shake the system, right? I mean, that's so core to the idea of what Bitcoin did was shake the banking system. And there's so much focus on like Bitcoin money and banking and everything else. There is that little like rebellious nature, I feel like, that has been reinvigorated with ordinals being like, we can fuck with your system too if we really want to, which has been kind of fun to watch and exciting, especially like everyone getting mad at people wearing wizard costumes at Bitcoin Miami. That was another cultural piece that came out of it.
yeah.
But wait, go ahead.
Oh, I was just like, yeah. Like, honestly, the work. I was just joking that someone earlier today. I was like, yeah, I think UD is gonna like single handedly save Bitcoin, because like just like saving the culture of Bitcoin, turning it from this like, when we got into the space, Bitcoin was like this like, oh, this is like new technology and we're like changing everything. And then I think it's bringing back the excitement and like, wow, we're like disrupting things back to Bitcoin, and like um, bringing the magic back to Bitcoin, magic internet money, right? Let's bring the magic back to Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch, but I do think that that's kind of core. And what I was excited to talk to you about is this idea of bringing these communities together. Obviously, as a community-owned show here at Coinage, steered by our NFT holders, co-owned by our NFT holders as we scale, our whole concept was, all right, if we have people from all over these ecosystems, we bring in their ideas, their questions. They can ask about Solana, they can ask about Cosmos, they can ask about anything, and it brings their biases, obviously their abilities to pump their bags, but it brings everyone together, which I think is something that's missing in the space, which is also why I have a lot of respect for Cosmos. But the other thing too is in my discussions, and I've chatted with a lot of people over my years covering crypto at CNBC and Yahoo and now at Coinage. Mike Novogratz is one of them who I think was talking about a lot of this stuff. He was like, keep your eyes on Cosmos. There's other people out there who have looked at this and what you've now built with Osmosis too, in this idea of bridging assets and the energy into very specific projects. Greg Osuri is another one of our NFT holders, the founder of Akash, building
Right.
this idea of the decentralized cloud. I found it because of Osmosis. And I was like poking around on what these projects are. So it's very interesting to think about it as a hub. Maybe we can shift into Osmosis, this hub of where it sucks in people who want to find ideas, projects, support them. What have you seen with the way that Osmosis, built in Cosmos, has been able to suck in energy funds and crypto enthusiasts from across the ecosystem to find projects? What was the idea with Osmosis? Maybe start there.
Yeah. So it's funny. Osmosis actually started from a little bit of a different angle where we were focused a lot, back in 2020, we were, sitting and be like, okay, when I started working in crypto, like in 2017, there was a few big problems that, like, let's say three big problems that we wanted to solve, right? Which was proof of stake, scalability, and privacy. And proof of stake, I think we did it. Solved, like mission accomplished. Like everything is running on proof of stake today. Now over 50% of crypto market cap is on proof of stake after the Ethereum merge. So we've done our job there. Scalability, I think, is like well underway. I think enough people are working on it, and like we've made huge strides. And I think it's more of an engineering problem at this point, and just like executing on it. I think the thing that like no one was really working on enough focus on was on the privacy side of things. Like I think you know one of my whole theses of DeFi in as a whole is like privacy for the individual, transparency for the system, and like that. People ask like, "What's the point of DeFi?" I think that encapsulated. Like you look at TradFi, you actually have decent privacy for the individual, right? No one can see like, oh, like how much is in your bank account and whatnot. But the problem is you have no transparency at the systemic level. You couldn't see what is FTX doing with all, what are all the balances actually there
Yeah.
in 2008. You couldn't see, oh, where was like risks piling up in the system, who was like, you know the people that were supposed to be insuring things, were they exposed to the same things they were supposed to be insuring? Like you had no systemic transparency. And in DeFi today, we almost have the opposite problem. We actually have amazing systemic transparency. You can see everything right now, but you have no
Yeah.
user privacy. And so I think that what really needed to be fixed is like solving this. Like, how do we bring user privacy into DeFi? And obviously there were strides. Like the Zcash team really did a lot of the initial work and like bringing zero knowledge proofs to reality, but like there's a lot left to do still. And so we were like, okay, we want to build a privacy focused product. And we were looking at the landscape of everything that was happening. And we saw the biggest source of privacy issue right now was front running and MEV that you saw. Like everyone was making transactions and getting front run, sandwiched. And really, this was a privacy problem. The problem was the mempools in blockchains are not private. Everyone can see the transactions you're going to do before you do them. That's a privacy issue. And so my co-founder and we started spending some time like designing a system for making that private. And that was our solution is called threshold decryption. And so we started designing that, building that out. And then we eventually thought to ourselves, well, this is a feature, not a product. What is the product that we're going to build here? And so then we're like, well, a DEX, right? That's the first thing that probably needs this level of privacy. And so that's sort of actually how Osmosis was born. That the original conception was like focus on privacy. But it came in and kind of we're like, okay, well, what do we launch this on, right? Obviously, we ended up building it on the Cosmos SDK, on the Cosmos stack for a number of reasons. One, obviously, we were well versed with it because we had been building it for a long time. But also, I think it was one of the only stacks that gave us the flexibility to like experiment with the stuff the way that we wanted to. Like, um, a lot of the stuff you want to do with privacy, you just need to do it on a custom blockchain because you need to go at the very core of a blockchain and and change how privacy works. You can't do this
Yeah.
on top of Ethereum. And so that's actually why you'll notice that a lot of the biggest privacy projects tend to be working in Cosmos, like whether you're talking about, you have Penumbra and Anoma and NIM and Secret Network and even Zcash is, I think, building a Cosmos SDK chain. So like yeah, you know a lot of the privacy stuff happens in Cosmos is one interesting thing you'll notice. Um,
Well,
but yeah,
one of the
so
things, I mean, when you talk about transparency versus privacy and at a systemic level versus a user level, I think that that's one that I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into based on what we've seen over the last couple of years from, systemic problems and collapses as well as personal stories too. If anyone out there is listening, we're about halfway into this space. If you want to retweet and bring more people into the discussion, we can get to questions on the back end. I think that'd be exciting, so feel free to do so. And if you're just tuning in, we got Sunny from Osmosis here on the space with Coinage chatting about this on the only award-winning community-owned show here in the Web3 space. And Sunny, one of the things around privacy versus transparency that I'd love to get your take on is kind of what happened with Terra in Anchor, because the idea there was, all right, everything would be on chain. You'd see all of this, and to your point, in comparing and contrasting FTX and what happened with Anchor, everyone saw the funds. Everyone could see in real time how many people were withdrawing funds from Anchor. And that
yep,
kind of also reinforced the panic selling that I think was going on, because everyone's like, all right, I got to get out of here first. So I
yep.
don't know. It raises new questions when you introduce full transparency in a way that, in the banking collapse that we saw with Silicon Valley Bank, the same thing kind of happened even without that transparency, because it was a small net community of founders all saying like, all right, Peter Thiel's telling us to get our money out of this bank because it's going to shit.
Yeah.
I mean, what have you seen when you compare some of these things and how crypto can actually help when you look at privacy and transparency at a systematic level?
Mhm. Well, I think like during the like great deleveraging of like 2021, right? Or sorry, 2022, right? Where like, basically leading from the Terra crash onwards, like you saw like, the great deleveraging through AC, everything. And you had so many of these like centralized, non-transparent lending platforms basically go under because, you know, no one could see how levered up they were. While all of the on-chain systems actually like fared completely well, right? Like none of the on-chain DeFi lending protocols or anything ever uh, went under. They because everyone could see exactly when liquidations would have been triggered, and like the whole mechanism is that you have these like public liquidation points that everyone is like acting has the full information around and can act based on. So yeah, like I think the Terra situation was less of an issue of I mean, that's an interesting point to make. That like yeah, like I think Terra was it was a reflexive thing where there was a lot of panic selling and that kind of caused the whole thing to unravel. But like we can go into a lot. I'm actually giving a talk this weekend at the Gateway Conference, which is like one of the big Cosmos conferences. It's my 1 year Terra retrospective. So I'll probably talk about
Listen,
it a
man,
lot.
you and I could share a couple drinks and share our 1 year Terra retrospective stories on that one too. Of course, it's been. We are also coming up on the 1 year anniversary of our Terra exclusive with Dokwan in Singapore as well. But beyond Terra, just as one example, I think with Osmosis is interesting because of the cannibalization. A lot of people might look at it of money moving from one thing to another without bringing more people into the camp. And I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do think it is an interesting way to discover projects in a way that's different than what Uniswap offers, because it's
Yeah.
on Ethereum, and then
Mhm.
you've got projects like Akash that are real and building and trying to do things. You also got meme tokens in the Cosmos ecosystem, like Chihuahua token, which
Yeah.
may have eaten up some of my money. Talk to me about what you've seen when you unlock that. Is it really fair to say that it's cannibalizing when you offer the ability to swap kind of transparently and freely between something and the other thing?
I've never heard that anyone call it cannibalizing, so that's a. But I mean, our goal is so going back to like what did Osmosis help unlock within Cosmos was it was very hard for a lot of these custom blockchains to get listed on centralized exchanges because for a lot of centralized exchanges plugging in ERC20 is very fast, but like plugging in a new Cosmos SDK blockchain, there was a lot of work for them every single time, and so that's why like AKT, like a Akash token, never got it got listed on like maybe like one exchange or something prior to Osmosis launch, but like with Osmosis using this like IBC standard, it was a you know if as long as your protocol supports IBC, it's a one click thing to like add it to Osmosis, and that basically made it so, if you look at the Cosmos ecosystem as a whole, it actually is like the second biggest ecosystem by like market cap. Like if you look at if you add up, look at just take like the top 200, 300 assets by market cap, and like the Cosmos ecosystem has like the second most after Ethereum.
Hmm.
And the problem is, so there was all this like demand, and for like untapped demand, and like Osmosis can come in and sort of serve that and be like, okay, look, here's the first time you could actually trade all of these assets and really easily and in one place. So that was sort of our initial go to market, is like be the Uniswap for the Cosmos ecosystem. But we didn't want to be just, Uniswap, I think, tries to be as just be this DEX, or at least for a long time, it just like, oh, it's just this trading interface. That's it. You do the swaps here. But now you see that Uniswap is like expanding what they do. They launched their own wallet now as well. They added this like NFT marketplace, and this has been our strategy as well. Whereas like, how do we really focus on the UX, and like we treat Osmosis as like not just the DEX for Cosmos, but also like your wallet for Cosmos ecosystem, where it's like, hey, this is the way you can like hold all your assets on the Osmosis blockchain on one site, instead of having to go check your balances on like 20, 30 different chains. You can do it all in one place. You can do swaps here. We're adding a staking dashboard. So now you can start, instead of going to every like chain and having to stake there, you can just stake all from one block, one chain,
Yeah.
one user interface on Osmosis. Um, we just launched this app store on the Osmosis website where you can start to discover other apps within the Osmosis and Cosmos ecosystem, all from within one spot. So yeah, really kind of leaning into like being your portal to the Cosmos ecosystem, and then
Yeah.
eventually beyond.
Well, I think that's the interesting piece, at least for me, right? As someone who has been in crypto for a bit and tried to find real projects, the signal through the noise, I think. And maybe again, I don't want to shit on anything that's not a real project, because as we've seen, and I'd love to get your take on what we've seen in shitcoin spring and all the meme coins that have been popping up, but I do think that is an interesting decision for a lot of projects, because I assume, as we've seen with THORChain and Akash, other projects in the space that might want to build and solve real things, you kind of need the ability to work across chain or to solve things, as you said, in a more customizable way, versus just being an ERC20 token that might be very good at getting liquidity in terms of like having people discover your project. If you're a shitcoin, you launch an ERC20, you tell everyone, go to Uniswap, find us there. Versus building in the Cosmos ecosystem. I mean, what's your takeaway on that? If it was difficult for people to maybe launch a project and get listed on centralized exchanges, it seems like an interesting discussion to be had around, sure, it's one way to suck a lot of money in real quick, but if you're a real project building, you can look over here.
Yeah. Could you explain the question again?
Yeah, I mean, so the question right now, I think that a lot of founders might be facing is, if especially in the bear market, if you're trying to just get attention, and we've certainly seen a lot of people right now be able to get people to send them money by launching a shitcoin right now, an ERC20 shitcoin, versus like actually trying to build something that might have a use case down the line, building in the Cosmos ecosystem. Like you said, there's a larger hurdle to get listed on centralized exchanges, perhaps, or at least there
Mm-hmm.
was, but you know that might be where like real developers or builders want to go to solve their problem.
Yeah, it's on the centralized exchange side, things are obviously changing. I think centralized exchanges are starting to realize how fast the Cosmos ecosystem is growing. Coinbase just listed Osmo last week, basically. So I think
Yeah.
they are definitely expanding. They realize how fast Cosmos is growing and are rapidly like building the infrastructure to do that, and a lot of like infrastructure providers as well, custodians, like fiat on ramps, they're all starting to support more and more Cosmos assets. So we're starting to see a lot of the infrastructure that like basically like for a long time, like eh, Cosmos is like now like the second thing that integrators integrate. So first they like tackle the EVM ecosystem, but then the very next thing they go to is this like Cosmosm development ecosystem. Like, it used to be like Solana and stuff, but I think like just by number of development activity, number like projects and stuff, I think Cosmos is like very much like number two right now.
Oh, you touched on my cannibalization point a little bit there, my friend, because that is one of the things too. And we saw this after the collapse of a few chains, the idea of other people trying to get Terra developers to come over to their camp. Polygon and Solana were kind of also NFT projects, by the way. Increasingly, you mentioned Ordinals, a bunch of people saying, come build over here, put your NFT, bridge your NFTs over to us. And so
Yeah.
there is kind of like this ongoing competition, and I guess that's natural for any space to kind of say, build over here, build with us. How have
Mhm.
you seen that change maybe in the bear market versus the bull, when people are a lot more, searching for signal to say, no, we are the hot space to be right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, with the Terra stuff, like, I think a lot of the ex Terra developers ended up coming to Osmosis, largely because there was already a huge overlap in community. Like, Osmosis was the biggest DEX for UST. And like the Cosmosm development framework is the same that we had on Osmosis as there was on Terra. So, you look at a lot of the projects, they have migrated on into Osmosis or other Cosmos ecosystem projects, or like chains, or just building their own Cosmos chain, like Kujira, for example, right? Or White Whale, and there's a number of these. Um, so, I think right now the focus has, for us at least, we were able to like bring over a lot of these Terra projects, and our goal was like, let's help get these projects launched. And this is sort of what's been happening. We're starting to see that now, where you have these projects that have been building for the last, it took, Terra crash happened. It took them a couple months to get their bearings again, and now like 6 9 months later, now they're starting to launch. So you had Mars just launched their lending protocol on Osmosis like two months ago. You have StreamSwap just launched. You have the Levana is launching their Perps protocol on Osmosis probably in a week or two. You have Calc, which is this like DCA tool. So our goal has been sort of less on like number of developers, like having a lot of developers but not a lot of useful products is not helpful. We kind of all for, at least within Osmosis, went for a more quality over quantity approach, where it's like, hey, let's find like the teams that are actually like really high quality and work with them to ship products on Osmosis. And like, we don't need 20 shitty lending protocols. We need one or two like really high quality ones, and that have like really good UX and things that like compose well with each other. So that's been our sort of strategy, has been less focused on like, cannibalism of developers, but really like finding the one thing I like to say as well is like, I think Ethereum and Cosmos are the only two um, missionary driven ecosystems rather than mercenary driven.
What do you mean by that? That's an interesting distinction there. I like that.
Um, that like most of the developers in these ecosystems are here because like very like philosophical alignment with like the values of the ecosystem, more so than like, a lot of the Solana developers have, as Solana crashed, like it kind of, they've jumped onto Aptos and Sui and stuff, and they'll probably jump onto the next thing. Same thing with like a lot of the EVM, like a lot of the EVM clones, basically. Like people would just go to wherever like the liquidity mining incentives were, right? Like, oh, okay, I can go deploy on Avalanche right now. Okay, then I can go deploy on Polygon. I'll go deploy on Phantom. Like whoever's paying these incentives. While I think the Ethereum itself, like very missionary driven. Like people are there, like they will live and die by it. And I think like Cosmos, there's a Cosmos community that will like live and die by it.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make too, and we try to do that with our prior episodes into the Solana ecosystem. The idea of what exactly are all of these chains building for, and you're right to point out there's a lot of clones, and how do you distinguish yourself from the other one if all you're doing is building a lot of things? But Cosmos, like I said, if your whole thing is around inter-chain compatibility, then it's distinct from what we're seeing in other places where it's building up walls and having people stay in your camp, which I think is an important distinction to make for anyone listening who's never heard of Cosmos before. I don't want to steal too much of your juice from the speech you're giving in a week for your year's retrospective on Terra, and I promise this will be the last question I ask you before we move on. But what was your biggest takeaway from the Terra collapse as someone who's building in this space?
Um, I was mostly disappointed with the lack of the. There was an experiment that was set out to do, like, when the Terra team like visited us in the Cosmos office like years ago, back when Terra was a tiny project. They explained to us the stablecoin design, and I was just like, what? Like, this makes no sense. This is whack. But they were like, no, 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 no. It doesn't matter, because as long as the eh, we're going to build a real economy that drives demand for this system, and this is how true fiat currencies work, right? Like, fiat currencies remain stable because they have a real economy behind them that's like driving the demand for the system. And they have this like tax loop sort of thing, and that's what the whole idea behind the Terra tax and everything was. And so they were really, that was like the premise of the thing, and they kind of started doing that. You had Chai, they were building this payment stuff. Okay, maybe it's unclear now whether how much of that was true or not with the Chai stuff, but like, it seemed like there was something there. They had this DeFi ecosystem building with like Mirror and like all the other DeFi products. But then like at some point maybe they got greedy and they just like Anchor was the scam, right? Where it was like, oh, what it did was it shifted from being like true organic demand for this stablecoin to being like almost all inauthentic, inorganic demand that was not that fled as soon as things got shaky. And that was like the problem, right? Where everyone went running for the door as soon as things got a little shaky. And so for me, I think building algorithmic fiat currencies like stablecoins is necessary for like the success of the space. Like, without it, like, what are we, like, if we're just all going to use USDC, right? Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing all of this? And so I just think I'm a little bit disappointed and upset that like the crash of Terra caused by this like greed, like, probably set the space back by like years, just because the innovation, no one wants to be the one out there saying, oh, I'm working on new designs for algorithmic stablecoins, right? You're going to be like kicked out of the room. And so, but I think
Yeah,
that
I
is what
was.
we need to be doing, right? We need to be like figuring how we the goal I got, like I said, I joined because of Bitcoin, and the goal was to build like sovereign non-state money. And I think Bitcoin, I guess what I realized through my study of monetary economics and stuff was like Bitcoin is a digital gold, which is great, but like, the gold standard fell apart for a reason. It doesn't make for good money, and it does other things. And so um we, along with digital gold, we also need like digital native fiat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I think so. I mean, that's the thing. As like a mission-driven project, I mean, Do Kwon was spot on with, I think, what you just said. Like, everyone else is looking around, being like, "Well, if we're decentralized and permissionless, how are we going to have a centralized permission stablecoin being the thing that everyone uses as our unit of economics?" And everyone's like, "Okay, well, I guess this thing will be the answer." And so I don't know what the next answer becomes, or maybe more importantly, what the next big thing is, if it's not just, oh, you can earn a juicy yield over here that sucks more money into the system. Like, what you see as the next big mission that will attract people back into crypto, because not only did that collapse set people back, you then had the FTX collapse that set, I think, the more mainstream people who were just thinking about crypto, not even the technology, but just maybe just, the only person that they could identify in a lineup is SBF, and now he's down too. So I don't know what you think, that also did to the space, but what you see as the next big mission that will drive people's enthusiasm back into saying, oh, yeah, crypto is where it's at.
Yeah, I've personally been a big believer in like web of trust systems for a long time, and like how do you build on-chain decentralized trust graphs. And I think that became so much more important after this like AI emergence, right? Like, I don't know how to describe it because people in the field obviously knew this was happening, but I think for most of us, I'm sure ChatGPT took us by surprise, right? It's like,
Yeah.
wait, this is what was capable. Like, I did not realize that. And it's like, I had a friend who like built this like prank call app that like it would call people like with a fake voice and like offer like so it'll like generate what to say and stuff. And he had like the cops called it. Like I think cops showed up to his parents' house or something. But like it's scary because we're getting to a world where like you're not going to be able to uh, we need strong cryptographic identity systems where like you need if you want to you're gonna have AI agents trying to like impersonate your friends and family and like when you're just talking to people online like we need like cryptographic identity for how to communicate with people. And I think that building this like infrastructure for getting crypto wallets into the hands of everyone is like a of vital importance and like of renewed vital importance to me. And I don't know if that answers the question of what will bring people into crypto, but I think it's definitely why it's a lot more important. And I think you know hopefully there's gonna be a lot of people focused on that problem.
Yeah, I think you're right to point out ChatGPT AI's, appearance on the scene caught a lot of people off guard, and now you got Sam Altman basically being the voice of everyone. Everyone in Congress listens to the guy, but
Yep.
he's also, he's got his own project. We spotlighted WorldCoin and what that maybe is doing when it comes to identity on chain. But I
Hmm.
think you're right. There's all kinds of shit that's now possible here. I don't know which one terrifies you the most because we asked Greg Osuri, he was on the show and he was talking about ChatGPT getting turned on, plugged into the internet. What the hell could happen there? I'm always constantly talking about maybe perhaps bounties and everyone else. You got flying drones around. Eventually, there could just be floating bounties on kill this person, and then you have to pay them to survive. I don't know what it looks like, man, but it scares the shit out of me. And I imagine as someone as smart as you probably also have your own fears, or maybe not. Maybe they're all overblown. What's your take?
Um, I'm not sure if I'm like super worried about like, or to be honest, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what the limitations are right now. Like, I think, uh, are we like, I have some friends who are like, oh my God, we're like in the process of inventing God and like, we're gonna, AGI is around the corner. And I don't know about that because like, I feel like AI goes through these like periods of like, you know, rapid innovation and they always have these like AI winters where like they hit some roadblock and get stuck and for like a decade and then they figure something else out. So I don't think we're near. I don't know if we're near AGI yet, but just that what we do have today, I think, is going to be so like we barely scratched the surface of how much stuff is going to change right now with just the technology we have today. Like have you seen the new Photoshop thing where like you can like
Yes.
content
Yes.
that is insane, right? Like just what we can do like well, what's like the craziest part to me? What I find somewhat hilarious is that like for the longest time, we always thought like, oh, automation is gonna come and like replace like manual jobs, like robot. You're gonna get rid of the waiters are gonna lose jobs. And there's like truck drivers are gonna lose jobs. It's funny that it's actually the creative jobs that are the ones that are being gonna get hit first. It's gonna be your artists and your writers and it's just a surprising outcome that was
Yeah, you're right. It's all the truck drivers are like, good luck. We're going to need UBI for you, truck driver. And then it's like the guy who's in the creative office doing the old animations, everything. He's like, what the hell happened? Yeah, no, it is true. It does happen quick. That's the thing. And it catches everybody off guard. But I don't know. To tie this all full circle, because I know we only got about like 10 minutes left here, Sunny, and we'd love to have you back on the show, by the way. I'd love to budget some more time to dig deeper into all this stuff, because that's what we try and do. And one of our last episodes did just dig into AI and what that's doing for the music world and how Web3 music might be able to help. But tying it back to Cosmos and where all this stuff goes, I mean, what do you think really unlocks the one advantage that Cosmos has over the rest of the crypto environment when it comes into all of those other projects? The idea of where this goes. You know, we've talked about Akash this week. If people are listening, our episode about Akash and what the decentralized cloud can do to maybe solve the chip shortage problem that's happening right now, because all these models are very energy and computing power intensive. Akash is helping in that regard. What do you see as maybe the element that Cosmos has that sets it up well for the future, and what is there on the roadmap that you're most excited about for your community to be rolling out?
Hmm. Yeah, I think the ability to go modify the blockchain to do these UX flows and features that you couldn't do on generalized blockchains in a faster iteration speed. So like, account abstraction and stuff that's like slowly coming about on Ethereum. Like we've had this tooling and stuff in Cosmos for like a long time. Like in Osmosis today, you can actually already pay your transaction fees in any token you want. I've always found that to be one of the biggest UX hurdles of like, oh, you got to go use this specific token to pay your fees. And it's just like, I remember like a few years ago, what happened was I was like showing a friend how to use DAI for payments, and I made
Mm-hmm.
him download an ETH wallet, sent him some DAI, and I'm like, cool, send it back now. And then he couldn't because he didn't have any ETH, and I'm like, this is so silly. So it's like, but to fix that at Ethereum, you have to like build these like higher level protocols that like don't get full adoption because they're not the default path. While in Cosmos, it's like, oh, we can actually just go fix the blockchain to like allow you to pay tokens, pay your fees in any token you want, or like the privacy stuff that we've been talking about, right? Like it was like, oh, we can just go make it like build these privacy primitives into the blockchain itself directly.
Yeah.
We can, and then there's also what's cool is you can also like find new sources of revenue for the blockchain as well, where like you have a lot of this like MEV value currently that gets like given only to validators and like is being done off chain systems like Flashbots.
Sure.
We can build these on chain protocols that can be smarter and like actually capture, instead of leaking that value to external parties, it can actually be captured on chain and distributed to like the native token holders of your chain. And so this is like very new revenue sources for token holders is another interesting exploration area.
Let me ask you this too, just to kind of wrap up, because covering this from the CNBC and Yahoo world, I think you're right. So much of crypto had come from banking, finance, and what's this going to be about? And then you had regulation come in, and the whole idea of all right, we can shut all this down, and we certainly saw a wave of that now. Regulation, at least here in the U.S., has taken a turn for the worse. And we've talked about how this election might be huge for what happens in 2024. But when you look at maybe the idea of turning it off, choke points here, if you got Uniswap and it's all on Ethereum, there's certainly a choke point there. If you've got, what THORChain's been able to build and the idea of just kind of being able to switch from whatever to whatever, and Osmosis as well, the whole idea of where regulation actually even matters, are we too far to where any regulator would be able to turn any of this off?
Um, I don't know. I mean, if they can just go get USDC to like freeze transfers, they probably like destroy all of Ethereum DeFi. And so it's like that's definitely a choke point. Getting like fixing, one of our focuses, our one of our internal goals at Osmosis is like by the next bull run, like new crypto entrants should be able to onboard into Osmosis directly, not onto Coinbase. Like today, what happens is every time there's a new bull run, there's a lot of like people get interested in crypto. They go onto Coinbase, buy some Bitcoin and ETH, and like that's where they stop, right? Like that's like less than 10%, probably less than 5% really probably ever make it onto actually using like a blockchain. And so
Sure.
I think there's a lot of things that lead to that. Like I think uh, you know, the way centralized exchanges have just much better UX, better custody. Fiat on ramps is a big one. And so our goal is how can we like mirror as much of that in a decentralized way on Osmosis as possible. So, this is why our big focus on like account abstraction, MPC wallets kind of stuff on the custody side. We've integrated like multiple fiat aggregate on ramps, but what we're doing is have an aggregator that sort of aggregates over different fiat on ramps and then like let into stable coins on Osmosis, and then like you can swap into any asset in Osmosis. So like trying to build the like buy sell widget on Coinbase, but like as decentralized as possible. It's impossible to get fully there because at any point that you're touching the fiat rails, it's a choke point. But like, how can we integrate as many options as possible and like decentralize over them, route through whoever's giving the best pricing and stuff. So
Yeah.
there's definitely choke points, and I think the best thing we can do is like start to chip away with as many of them as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely spot on. I mean, I think everyone gets sucked in through Coinbase. That was me in 2014. My brother gave me half a Bitcoin as a graduation present. Never stopped letting me know about it. Reminds me every single goddamn day that that's what he gave me. And but after that, it became farther and farther along. Took me another bull cycle. Then took me the last bull cycle to jump into Osmosis and touch the Cosmos ecosystem. So I think that definitely is the evolution. So that's smart. We always wrap up, Sunny, with one big, bold call. We let our guests make a claim that will come true in 2023. I want to give you the time to make one big, bold call for something that we can hold on record and bring back when either you're right or you're wrong. Either way, we'll give you your props or we'll say, oh, we're going to have Sunny back on to talk about why that didn't happen. What do you see as the big, bold call for everyone to keep their eyes on in crypto in 2023?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I already touched on this, but I think people are definitely underestimating Bitcoin, and I think I've been saying this for a long time, but I think it's like people may be starting to see it now, but I think it's gonna go like exponential, like the amount of developer activity on top of Bitcoins, especially like people are gonna. And I think like Bitcoin core development is gonna start to speed up again, where like I think there's a cultural shift happening in Bitcoin right now, and like uh, yeah, like I've always been skeptical of the flippening, and I'm more confident than ever that like the flippening is not going to happen in 2023. How about that? Let's go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, that we'll end on that. We like the juice there. But no, you got to come back on. And if anyone in the Cosmos ecosystem is listening, of course, we've been able to suck in some of those builders in your ecosystem to co-own Coinage with us, to mint our NFT and actually own this show as a community-owned show. We've got the co-founder of Netflix, as I mentioned, Chad Barraford, Greg Osiri from Akash. Would love to have more Cosmos ecosystem members as our co-owners. But the founder of Osmosis, Sunny Aggarwal, thank you so much for coming on, man. Would love to have you back. Thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on. This was really fun.
Awesome. We'll have you back on soon. Everyone listening, you can learn more about our project at coinage.media. Subscribe to our episodes on YouTube. We do these every week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Friday, a new episode out for our subscribers. Thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.